We've got a couple ways we could go. Some of you haven't read the book. It might be helpful to tell a couple of stories that are in the book. When I go out and speak in person, I usually share 5 stories, and then we open up after each story we open up the floor to comments and questions. So I could share with you a couple of stories, which I think would get everybody sort of on the same page here. The other thing is that we've got categories of contact marketing campaign types that I think we should probably talk about. I think it would be helpful to go through those. So would you mind if I tell you my story of how I got involved in contact marketing? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, so mine is that when I first graduated from USC, my education was in marketing, and I was already a published cartoonist in one of the papers in LA, and direct marketing and direct mail had just become a force. Also, personalization had just become a force, and so I wanted to get out there, and I mean it was a really pretty exciting time for direct mail actually. And I wanted to get out there and create direct mail campaigns for the biggest, most sophisticated users of direct marketing, and that was the magazine publishers. They were just relentless testers. They were incredible, and so and they also had the biggest budgets, which made them even more incredible for me. Good place to start. And what I wanted to do was combine cartooning and personalization with direct mail. But there was one problem. Does anyone remember the name David Ogilvy?
Oh yeah,
Sure. Ring a bell at all?
Ogilvy and Mather.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I knew you would know that. That's true. David Ogilvy is the founder of Ogilvy and Mather, I think one of the 10 top largest ad agencies in the world. He was also probably the original thought leader in marketing, or maybe just the original thought leader in general. People just followed whatever he had to say. And one of those things that he used to say is, humor doesn't work in advertising and marketing. And so all of the pundits, all of his followers actually, were going around saying, oh, and by the way, humor doesn't, well, they'd have a list of things to do, 10 things that you could either do or not do to make your campaign succeed. And one of the things that was always on the list was, don't use humor. But when I heard that, I thought, these guys don't understand it. They don't understand how it works. And in fact, part of that came from an article that I received from the Cartoonist Guild, from Folio magazine. Folio is, if you don't know Folio, I don't blame you. It's the magazine for people who publish magazines. So it's a pretty small type. But anyway, this article said that cartoons were almost always the best read and remembered part of anything they're in editorially, according to just countless readership surveys. So I thought, well, okay, then that's going to work. I think that's a great thing to combine with personalization in direct marketing. So my first 2 assignments were for Rolling Stone and Bon Appetit magazines. And both of those test pieces beat their controls. Ken, I know you're going to really appreciate the meaning of that. But for everyone else, in statistics, you test against a control group, a constant. In direct marketing, when you create a campaign, you're testing that campaign against the most effective thing they've ever mailed. And if you tie a control, that means you just tied the record. I beat these things, the controls, the first 2 assignments, which was like a rookie walking onto the field in Major League in Major League Baseball and hitting 2 Grand Slam home runs. That was a big deal for me. And so I knew that was my opening to reach out and connect with the rest of publishing and get them all as clients. I was a young guy, so I thought, well, of course, that's how you do it. And so maybe in my ignorance, I put together a campaign, and that campaign needed to reach probably just 24 VPs and directors of circulation at the big Manhattan-based media companies that are Time Inc. and Condé Nast and the Wall Street Journal, Forbes. There are a bunch of them. But anyway, I needed to reach these people, and I thought, well, the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to put together a little campaign. I didn't know what to call it, so I called it a contact campaign. The contact campaign was an 8x, I'll hold my hands up, so it's kind of hard to do that on the camera, but anyway, it was an 8x10 print of a cartoon, each one personalized to each recipient. and then a note that went with it saying, "This is the device I just used to beat the controls for Rolling Stone and Bon Appetit, and I think we should put this to the test for your titles." If I had gotten a 1% response rate, a lot of times, Ken, I think you can bear me out on this. We keep hearing that 1% is a common, or you're doing well, and it's the most common response rate to a direct mail campaign. Actually, there is no such number, but if I'd gotten a 1% response rate to this campaign, to 24 people, that would have meant I reached maybe a quarter of a person, which wouldn't have worked. And in fact, even a 10% response rate would have been a disappointment. But what do you suppose I got? Any guesses?
All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we assume you got all of them.
You're right. I reached all of them, and all of them became clients. So it was not only a 100% response rate, or penetration, but also 100% conversion. This was worth millions of dollars to me, and it came from a campaign that I spent about $100 on. And that, I think, is the essence of contact marketing here. We're reaching out to very, very few people. You don't really need to spend a lot per person, but certainly you're going to spend more per person than you. In traditional marketing, we worry about tenths of a penny, thousands of a penny in cost per click campaigns and cost per thousand impressions in traditional publishing and so on. You really worry about just fractions of a penny. But you're doing that because you're going out to a mass audience, and that a fraction of a penny adds up over 1 million people or several million people. And really the issue is that the response rates are so darn low. But in contact marketing, what I discovered first in my first campaign there, but then in other campaigns, other things that other people have been doing, it's not common, but it's not terribly uncommon, at least hear stories of hitting 100% response rates, which is a blasphemy in marketing. Actually, it doesn't sounds like I'm just telling you that I spotted a UFO. I mean, it's not supposed to happen, but in fact, it is happening. But even if you get let's say a 10% response rate, compared to most response rates to most campaign types, that's huge. And we're also then looking at ROI figures that are, again, off the charts. It seems pretty common to see that ROI figures in the tens or hundreds of thousands of percent, which are numbers that are really kind of hard to wrap your head around. I don't even know what it's kind of like. You don't know, what does it mean to get 100,000% ROI? Well, it certainly means a good thing for your campaign, but what's such an odd number? But because all that's happening, you can afford to spend more per person if these are the right people, and you're really that this is relevant to them, and you know that you can offer something that'll help them do their business more effectively, more efficiently, or help them with compliance, or help them grow their market share, anything along those lines. Ken, you deal with that all the time. But all of you are offering solutions that will change or potentially can change, most of you are offering solutions that can potentially change the scale of their business or change their marketplace. I mean, they're standing in the marketplace. So every one of you has a good reason for reaching out to the right people. And then it makes sense to, of course, if you're doing that, reach them. So that's my story. Now, I think I want to share one other story with you. This is the story of Dan Waldschmidt. And Dan is he's an extreme athlete, and he runs 100-mile races and wins. That's pretty extreme in my book. But he's also one of the top sales bloggers in the world. His blog is called Edgy Conversations, and he's got a best-selling book out, same name. So those are sort of the branding things that he does. But what he actually does for a living is he's a turnaround specialist, and he's got a really interesting method for reaching CEOs of companies that are having trouble. What he does is he reads the business news every morning, and he's looking for stories of missed earnings estimates. And when he finds one, he has this beautiful sword made up. And this sword, I mean, I'm going to step back a little bit. It's this big, it's a full-size sword, and it's made by the prop maker who made the swords for the movie Gladiator. They're just beautiful. And on the sword, he has the CEO's name engraved on it, and then an inscription of his own. If you're not all in, you're not in at all. And this whole thing is put in this beautiful wooden box, a mahogany box, felt lined, just a beautiful thing. And then into that box goes a handwritten letter. And what I found, by the way, is that handwritten letters turn out to be a common thread in contact marketing campaign time. So anyway, the letter said, business is war, and I noticed you missed a battle, or you lost a battle recently, and I just want to let you know, if you ever need a few extra hands in battle, we've got your back. He doesn't put branding on it. There's no logos. There's nothing like that. It's just a handwritten note, probably with his phone number. And I'm just kind of curious what you think of this one. What do you suppose he gets for a response rate to that? Anybody have any guesses? Who thinks he gets 10%?
I'm gonna guess higher.
Yeah, it's higher.
Sorry?
100%.
We're assuming higher than.
Higher.
Higher. I'll go all the way up. Who thinks he gets 100%? I'm in there too. Yeah, that's what he gets. So far, he's saying, well, I mean, there might be the one or two that he doesn't get through to, but essentially he's saying he's getting 100% response rate to that. Now, that's not to suggest that you all then say, well, great, that's it. I just need to produce swords and send these out because it's not going to work. But what's really wonderful about Dan's example here is a sword is a weird thing to get as a gift, right? I mean, you could get tickets to a ball game, and if you were a fan of the team, you'd find those much more useful. Getting a sword is not something anyone's sitting around waiting to get. But the thing about, actually it's a great example of a visual metaphor. So that sword, I still think that they probably keep those swords, they might frame them in some way or in some way memorialize them. They're not going to throw them away, that's for sure. And the swords do a lot, actually. I said earlier that there's no branding in there, but actually it's all branding if you think about it, because the sword reflects the brand identity of Dan's blogging activities. I mean, Edgy Conversations and his book, Edgy Conversations, but also the value that he'd like to bring to the table. And another thing that I find ingenious about this is that he's not scrimping. It costs him $1,000 every time he sends one of these sword pieces out. But it's okay because every time he gets an assignment, it's $1 million and up to him. So I think it's wonderful audacity. I think audacity is also another thing that we find running throughout these campaigns as a common thread. But it's a great way to really express the value that he'd like to bring. He'd like to go to battle for you. Now we've got some CEOs in the room here, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about. I mean, if you had just missed your earnings estimates and you got a sword delivered to you in that way, what would your reaction be?
It's one of the shareholders telling me what to do with the sword.
Would you be tempted to respond to him?
Sure, I'd call the guy immediately and go, "This is cool as shit."
Yeah. So a couple of really cool things are happening there. One is Dan sent you something that is likely to have you create a reaction. You said cool as shit, but I would say that just gets people, the recipient, saying, "Man, I love the way this guy thinks. This is unbelievable. I got to meet this person." That's a really powerful thing to produce if you're just reaching out to someone who's really important to you. But the other thing that I think is really an important element of this is that he's using a very significant, and I would say traumatic, trigger event in the life of the CEO that he's reaching out to. Each CEO is reaching out to, because they've just announced that they've missed their earnings estimates. I mean, that's not a good thing. Not a good experience to be going through.
So what he's
and it's just the right time and with the right message.
It's a Trojan horse that he's using. He's getting into the castle with a Trojan horse, and the sword is the Trojan horse, right?
Yeah, it's a Trojan horse. Yeah,
that's what it is.
It is. That's true. But so there are a lot of really, I mean, although you just look at it on the surface, it's just a sword, nice sword, but it's just a sword. When you look below the surface and you see that that he's employing a trigger event, and and he's doing something that's so audacious and really so on target, I think, that it's causing the people who receive it to say, man, I love the way this person thinks. I love the way he operates. Yeah, you know, he's a turnaround specialist. I want to hear what he has to say. So it opens doors, it melts the ice, it does a lot of really very effective things very, very quickly. So when we come back to some of the issues that we heard expressed around the table, you know, I want this to be something that we all participate in, but I'm just thinking about Ken. You mentioned going to trade shows, and you know, there might be a way for you to capture all of the people that you needed to capture. If you wouldn't mind, I'll share another quick example. Todd Schnick is someone you might want to get to know. Todd of Intrepid Media, and what Todd does is I interviewed him for the book, and Todd said, "Yeah, I've got a great way to break through to people." What it is that I run a podcast. Actually, now we run lots of podcasts, and what I discovered real quickly was that people love to tell their stories. So when I reach out to them and I say, I'd like to give you a chance to tell your story, or let's say maybe more likely, you're reaching an executive assistant, and you're explaining to the assistant that, yes, I'd like to give Bob or Susan a chance to share their story with my audience. Usually they're pretty happy to do it. And when you do that, it involves, I just finished my show this morning, it's Contact Marketing Radio, and I have guests on every week. And when we do that, there's a bonding experience through all of that. It's just wonderful. We get to, and in fact, especially the time right after the show, when they're saying, "Oh, did I do well? Was I okay? I mean, did you think I provided value?" They're usually really anxious to provide value. You get to talk to them about it. It's, yeah, of course, you were great. Actually, I love the way you explained this or that. And okay, great. And you always end up during that conversation with opportunities to collaborate. It's amazing. It happens almost every time. And so, Ken, what I was thinking is that Todd Schnick does something really, really interesting with his podcasts in conjunction with trade shows. And what he does is he converts his client's booth into a broadcast booth, and they do multiple episode after really interview after interview after interview at the show. So they get the right people, the people that they wanted to connect with at the show, lining up at their booth for their interview. What do you think of that? Would that help? Is Ken there? Oh, there he is. Yeah.
The answer is I don't know. When I go to a trade show, typically, although some of my staff like getting a booth, I don't. I sort of take a George Patton view. I want to be mobile. I don't want a fixed wall. I want to be working the trade show, sitting in the conference sessions, and locating high-value people myself, striking up a conversation, and then working them over time afterwards. I'm not saying one is better than the other. So, I'm not disagreeing with the potential for that approach. That sounds very interesting. Is Todd based here in Atlanta?
Sorry?
Is Todd based here in Atlanta? Todd Schnick?
He was. He just moved to Chicago. And the name of his company again is Intrepid Media.
Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff. He can be quite direct, a little bit provocative, and a very clear thinker. I like him. I've liked the stuff of his that I've read. My approach is going to be a little more humorous and warm and relationship building. I mean, literally, I'll go to a trade show event with a shirt that says "Optimizing the shit out of marketing," and people will throw their cards at me to get a copy of the shirt. Can you send me one of those shirts? Can you?
Nice.
Yeah. So that's how. That's usually a big icebreaker. So I have my own techniques.
That's great, actually.
Because I basically, my staff said they Just need to get me a t-shirt gun and cut me loose.
I mean, I think that's actually great. That's a great one, Ken. You know what's always amazing to me is when I get to speak to groups, and I ask about some of the solutions that they're using already using. There's already all kinds of great things in the room. I mean, among the people in the room, and that's a great example of it actually. I don't think I've heard of that one before. They're just having a T-shirt that's. I mean, it's more than humorous. It's provocative, and it just kind of shakes people out of their. I mean, when you have a booth, you notice people walk by and they sort of look at you a little askance before then they get by, and then they'll take a look at what your booth is, but they don't really want to engage. They don't want to be pushed into engaging, and your shirt breaks the ice. I think thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great one. The thing I think would be helpful is, again, we've got people that in the room that have read the book or read parts of the book, and some that haven't read any of the book, is to go over and talk about the categories of content marketing campaigns that I was able to assemble for the book, and why don't we then look at where these might, let's have a discussion here about where these might fit some of the challenges that you've each described as we went around the table. So the first one that I'd like to take a look at are gifts in visual metaphors. And there are all kinds of gifts. There's just straight gifts. There's a guy who was in the audience when I was speaking in Florida a couple of weeks ago, and I'd asked, what are you using to break through? And he said, well, you're going to think this is dumb, but I'm in commercial real estate, and I had this prospect. I really wanted to do business with him, but I couldn't get through. But he was never answering my phone calls, so I knew that his birthday was coming up, and I just bought a little cupcake and put a little a birthday candle in it and had it delivered. And the guy called me right back, and we got a $200,000 deal right away. And I thought, okay, great. I mean, that came from just a cupcakes. It's just flowers and cupcakes and so on could be effective in the right context. But one of the things that I noticed when in these interviews of the sales thought leaders that I interviewed for the book is that they had some really specific ways of using gifts. So one of those that I think is kind of interesting is half of a gift. Does everyone know what I mean? Half of a gift? Yeah. Should I explain that? It's you're giving half of the gift to bring the other half when you meet. So it could be a shoe that shows up, and it's the right size, and it's a nice shoe with a note. I mean, this one I've never used this one, but I keep hearing these stories of that showing up with a note saying, "I'd like to get my foot in the door." And although I think that's really cutesy, and that you don't want to be cutesy, I don't think that's the right approach. But certainly, if you are using this to break through, and you're saying, look, this is a nice pair of shoes, and I'll bring the other shoe when we meet. I'm curious, anyone have any reaction to that?
I don't like it.
You do or do not?
Do not agree, yeah.
And I couldn't see who's talking.
Oh, it's this guy over here.
Oh, no wonder I couldn't. I share that impression actually. There are other variations on this. Another one that's very common is sending either a remote control car model or remote control helicopter model, and it arrives without the remote control unit, and the letter says, "I'll bring the unit when we meet." Again, same reaction or?
That one seems better. Not sure why, but I like that one better. The second one, remote control.
I think I actually read that part of the book, and I think that if you can come up with something that is extremely pertinent to that person, then I think it's okay. But if it's just like something random that isn't very specific to what might pique their interest, then to me it definitely feels too much like, okay, all I really want to do is meet with you,
Yeah.
And even though that's the intent, it's too out there.
Yeah.
Well, good. Thank you for sharing your comments, because I think that here's my reaction to it. I guess you probably know because you read that part of the book, but my reaction to that is that it's too blunt. It's not relevant. Other than if you sent me a Ferrari, I love Ferraris. And actually, if you sent me a drone, you'd really get my attention. Just because I'm fascinated with drones lately. But basically, if you're going to send half of a gift, it's really manipulative. And nobody likes to be manipulated. And I did hear stories, though, from CEOs who said, oh, yeah, I've had people do that. And usually, if it's really something I want, then I'll have my assistant set up the meeting, but then I'll have the assistant walk in 4 minutes into our meeting and say, oh, you know that call that you've been waiting for? They're on the line now. And excuse the sales rep. So I got the control unit, and then it goes to my kids or my grandkids. And basically, it's a lot of wasted effort, I think. So although I'm saying that I haven't used it, but that's my reaction, is that I think that there are better ways to reach out. There are other forms of gifts that came up. One is a re-gift. I thought was pretty interesting. One of the people I interviewed consults sales teams, or consults sales management on building sales teams and building performance. And so she sent out a case of mugs that said top performer on it, each one, and sent that and said, here, give these out to your top performer every month. Enjoy that. I'm sure they'll have fun, and have the company's logo on it and so on. I'm sure they'll have fun. I'm sure they'll enjoy that. But if that isn't enough, let me know. We should talk. I've got other ways to really, really boost their performance. And that actually worked really well. I don't know whether there's an application in the room for that, but anybody have any thoughts about that one?
Well, the difference in that one, you said it was what was the nature of the business? Consulting company?
Well, she's a sales consultant.
So the thing about that one is it sort of has something to do with what you do. I mean, you're lending forward with something that's about what you can provide for the company as opposed to a shoe when you're a concrete salesman.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, I think so.
Concrete shoes.
Does it,
Very specific market.
What
Concrete blocks would work for you.
Absolutely.
Your target market are people with vowels in their names.
Right.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
We're talking about concrete shoes.
Send the left shoe and tell you'll bring the other one if they don't meet.
Christmas promotion is.
Concrete shoes would be really interesting. Great thought. Now, there's a couple other forms. There is art and film and I think it was photography that I was, art, humor, and film. And I guess my use of cartoons falls into that somewhat, but other uses of that were pretty interesting. One there was a photographer who wanted a landscape photographer wanted to sell his services. Actually, I'm not sure that's what it was. He was just a photographer, so he would go around and take pictures of the company's office building and have it nicely framed and send that as a contact piece, which I thought was interesting. I have an agency called Contacts. We actually do. I'm not pitching you at all, but I'm just explaining that we do just about everything that, or not many of the things that are in the book, although with a heavy emphasis on using cartoons, at least first, and in test. But the word contact, one of my favorite movies is Contact. And so we're looking at developing a contact package that would include a DVD of the movie Contact and a letter that explained, just kind of tied them together, making contact with other species or other worlds is in a way, well, it's significant. And making contact with the people who can change your world can also be very significant. So maybe that makes sense. Any thoughts about that? I mean, I'm wondering, God, I love the concrete shoes. That's the best one so far. But does that spur any thoughts? Anyone saying, I've got to use something like that?
Sounds a little far, not far afield, but I always my attention always gravitates towards something related to them or their industry. So
Yeah.
Dana here is about to produce some to-go mugs, and we're constantly trying to make the approach into the medical market. And so the mugs say, I market health. And you know, if you're an executive at a hospital, you're going to want the mug. And whenever we do something like this, we always take our own logo and we make it very small. We don't want it to dominate the scene. Just a small phone number, a small portion on the back of the shirt or something, because we want the person to say, "Oh, that's me." We want to go right into who they are, and I find that to be quite effective at getting their attention. I think where we struggle a little bit is sort of the long-term approach. Now that we have their attention, how do we get them to meet with us? And that may be a factor of we're getting the attention of somebody who maybe isn't the top dog, you know, the CEO or the COO, which is a different approach methodology. So there's still a lot of testing yet to be done. By the way, I just filled out the contact form on your website to meet with you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so.
And here we are.
Yeah.
There you go. Instant response.
Holy cow, he's fast. Yeah. Yeah. So,
included on. Actually, Ken, I want to just tell you about one other story that might be interesting to you. I don't know. There was an agency that wanted to connect with business owners, and they sent a set of serial. With an S, cereal gifts. I don't even know if these were gifts, really. I mean, there was one that they were visual metaphors. They were in boxes, and one time it shows up, and it's that method of teasing, sort of a multiple message, but you're teasing because you're not revealing who you are, or it's coming, it's almost here, billboards, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they did in these packages. But one of them had a cube of sugar, and it said it's going to be when it's coming, and when it comes, it's going to be really sweet. And another one was a lemon, and another one. They just went through these items that got people saying, "Oh, here's another one. Oh, here." The first one didn't get a lot of attention. The next one got a little more. What is this? A little more attention. But as they went along, it seems to get more and more attention, and they really want to know who is behind this. And similarly, another story that someone shared with me was I don't play poker, but there's a hand in poker that is a royal flush, and so I think that's the 10 Jack, King, Queen, and Ace, something like that. It's all in the same suit. So he would send a playing card, the first card in that hand, and the next day, the next card in the hand shows up. The next day, the next one shows up. Next day, the next one shows up. Then he shows up, and they say, well, and he's asking for the CEO, and they asked him, who are you? And he said, well, I'm the Ace of Hearts. And they say, oh, you're the guy who's sending who was sending those cards to us. So that building of curiosity about who's doing this might be a useful approach for you as well. What do you think of that? Does that spur any ideas?
I don't. I mean,
You're a winning hand.
yeah, that's clever. It's not in my opinion. It's not for my taste. It's not personal enough. I like getting personal. I do send out a lot of handwritten notes and follow-up notes, and I find I've become very approachable. I take the fear out of the room that I'm gonna shove a contract in their face and make them sign. And I'm a funny guy. I obviously know a lot about their industry. So if I can get that across, usually I can break the ice and get through, and I don't have to resort to something that is purely gimmicky. And I would put the playing cards, and I've seen that before. One question I have for you, Stu, is your opinion about approaching multiple people inside of an organization at the same time. So let's say you have the CEO and their head of, I would be approaching their head of marketing, or maybe their chief financial officer or head of CRM. Let's say I have 4 or 5 contacts at the same organization. Do you have opinions and do you have examples in the book or in your own experience of people making sort of the targeted approach to all the parties who need to help decide to hire you? Because it's usually never just one person. Does that make sense?
I would say that I think it makes a lot of sense, but we've heard comments around the room. We always hear these comments that if it's not relevant, then it's a pest. Then you're pestering them. But if it's relevant, then I think that's a great way of doing it. In fact, in the interviews that I'm doing, both for the radio show and now for my next book, I'm hearing a lot of people talking about don't single thread your sales. Meaning that if you just rely on one, if you've penetrated a company but you only have one contact, what happens when they go, or if they go before the sale's been consummated? And I think it makes a lot of sense to have a lot of people involved. I'm making a lot of progress with Oracle becoming one of our clients, and it is it's not by contacting one person or having conversations with one person. It's a lot of people, and I think that's the way that certainly large companies make decisions. There are a lot of people involved in those decisions. It's a collaborative thing rather than someone saying, "I like it, I'm going to do it." So I think that makes a lot of sense. Also when you're sending, depending on what it is you're sending or what your approach is, it's nice to let the other people know that you're connecting. That you're not just sending this to, you're not just reaching out to them, but you're reaching out to the CFO and the CEO and the director of something, of marketing, let's say, so that they each know that they're getting the same materials, the same communication, and so they ought to, certainly the people lower than the CEO, I think it leaves them feeling like, well, I better know something about this in case I'm asked. I think that causes them to pay more attention. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It was Ken asking.
Yes, yeah, it does make sense, yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, so then, of course, then we'll finish with gifts here really quickly and gifts, by the way, gifts can really come off gimmicky, I think, but, and they probably are gimmicky, but in this world of we're all involved with social selling, I think, at this point, or if you aren't, then the people who are working for you are, which is really just essentially it's using LinkedIn to connect with people, but really sort of cyber stalk them a little bit to understand who they are and what they like and what teams they follow or what school they went to and so on. Which I don't think I guess it's relevant in a really distant way, but. I guess the point I want to make is that we're getting email, we're getting requests for connections on LinkedIn and other social media platforms, but I think it has all the more impact than when something physical and tangible shows up. And I think that's why I gotta say I think that's why one of the reasons why our cartoon pieces are working so well. Would you like to see what those look like?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to back up a lot. This is, see if I can get it all on the camera. This is a big board. So it's 18 by 24 inches. It's a quarter-inch thick gator board, and on the back, there's a message from the sender to the recipient explaining why they want to meet. And then that shows up in this corrugated packaging. So it looks like it's coming out of a cartoon gallery, and there's a process to this. We assume that these things cost $250 a piece. So we assume that these are going to people that are important enough that they probably have executive assistants. And when we encounter executive assistants, I don't know, when you encounter executive assistants, I should ask this first. How many of you, just raise your hand, how many of you are relieved to reach an assistant? Anybody? A few of you, yeah. I am. I certainly am a big fan of executive assistants. People tend to think of them as someone that should be circumvented somehow, or I don't know, somehow they need to get past them. They need to get through them. They call them gatekeepers, but it's really an inaccurate way of seeing them. You really need to be thinking of them as talent scouts. You know, certainly their job is to keep the wrong people out because they don't want people calling in and wasting their executives' time. But I think another part of their job is to let the right people in, and they're always looking for opportunities or things that their executive might have missed otherwise, that they can bring to their attention. So it's not that they're there to keep everybody out. That's not what they do. That's not their job. So when we send the cartoon piece, we start with a phone contact with their executive assistant. We're saying, we're sending a print of a cartoon by one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists, that's me, about your boss. And although I want it to be a surprise to your boss, I don't want it to be a surprise to you. So would you mind if I send an email just to coordinate with you? The details of this is just so you know who I am and that I'm sending this and so on. And they're usually saying, yeah, great, please send me an email. So you get the email and you already have the phone number, I suppose, but direct line, and you follow up with an email and explain it, and then you're also following up when you have a FedEx tracking number. So by the time this thing actually shows up, they're kind of quarterbacking your campaign for you. They're making sure that their executive sees it. When it gets delivered in the mailroom, they're making sure that it makes it all the way up to their office, and it actually works quite well. Now, I'm going to just, James, I think James, you talked about sending cartoons and how that would be great for me because it is, because it's a demonstration of what I do, but would it translate to others? And I wanted to share with you the results that we saw from a test recently for one of a Fortune 250 client. Their go-to-market strategy is based on account-based marketing. So in other words, it's kind of a fancy way of saying they've compiled a list of people that they want to connect with and want to do business. Actually, not just people, but companies that they want to pull in as clients, and also companies that they want to capture more business with. And then they've stratified those. So the top stratum, the top level, is their global accounts, and this is like the global 500 companies. And they shared with me that their response rate to their contact efforts prior to our test was essentially 0%. When we started sending the big boards to them, we changed that to a 75% contact rate and a 50% meeting rate. They're not selling cartoons, but what we did was we expressed what we needed to express. Ken, you know about this because we're always telling our clients stories in a way that's compelling and gets people saying, I got to respond. I need to be part of this, or I need this. They've got a solution that works for me. So that's, I think, what cartoons are helpful to do, or in doing is helping us express that. Actually, beyond that though, we could have just sent a big board with a lot of other things, a lot of different art or creative approaches. So I guess another thing that the cartoons are doing specifically is that, when someone gets these cartoons, again, they're personalized to each recipient, and so they're about each recipient, and we're very careful about it. I've got a lot of test history behind the kinds of cartoons that we create and use, and what works and what doesn't. And so they're on target, and they're so on target that we know that people are keeping these things around in their offices, even sometimes to get them framed. I hate when they do that because then the message is covered up, but or they just keep them on their credenza and it stays there the rest of their careers. So the staying power is something really interesting about, cartoons versus, let's say, Cups, let's say the top producer, or or a remote control helicopter or something like that. They've got some interesting staying power. Well, so enough of that. Let's jump to another category. There's a category that I call free and nearly free, and that includes uses of social media, or really social selling, email and the phone and regular mail, and actually Google alerts. Does everyone have a Google alert on their name? Do you know what I mean by that? Google has a little service that you can set up in your Google account, and it's called a Google alert, and you can just have it alert you anytime your name is mentioned. Usually it's in any sort of posting, but in the news or anywhere on the web, your name will come up, and you'll get a notification that your name came up, and those can be really useful because a lot of executives seem to have those set up. I certainly have one set up on my name. I want to know what people are saying, and if someone's saying if someone is incorrect in what they're saying, I want to correct it. So I just think it's just prudent to have an alert on your name. And what some of the people I've interviewed found is that just by mentioning someone in a positive way in a blog post, maybe it's a guest blog post, it's on a much larger blog, something like that, that helps them break through. Because they're saying, hey, I just saw the post you put up about me, thank you, something like that. But I was hearing some really interesting uses of, let's say, email. I know email is something that's being used or maybe misused, is a better way of putting it. I mean, these broadcast emails, I don't know, does anyone have any stories of broadcast emails working well at this point?
Dana? No. What about for the trade show?
Yeah, we recently did a pre-show email to a trade show we actually did have a table at, and it was a list. We had never contacted them before, and we got a 50% open rate. I was pretty surprised.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
She got a 50% open rate, not we. It was really her effort.
Okay, well,
Okay, I got 50% open rate.
Excellent.
Yes.
And by the way, I'm a marketer, and I always say we too. Okay. But yeah, I mean that's great. Now you have a trigger event. Everyone's going to that show. So there's relevance, and I think that, and I'm sure you mentioned that in the subject line.
We did. Yes.
You know, I also use cartoons in email, and the same cartoon device that I use in direct mail and other forums, and we find that if we tell them in the subject line that there's a cartoon about them, we tend to get really high open rates as well for that. So there are some interesting ways to use email, but if we depart broadcast for a moment, the broadcast platforms and model for a moment, and just talk about individual emails, I was hearing some really interesting things, and I've tried them actually after hearing them for reaching someone that's important to you. Again, all of this said with the note that, with the asterisk, the caveat that you better be reaching out with something that's relevant and useful to this person, because if you aren't, you're just bothering them. We've heard those comments around the room, but if you aren't, you're just bothering them. And what's the point of nobody? It's not even worth your own time. It's certainly not worth their time. But if you do have that, so we're assuming all of that. On the weekends, actually the advice that I got was that during the week, the inboxes for CEOs, and also let's use CEO as a euphemism here, as the center of enterprise opportunity. It may not be it may not be the chief executive officer that you need to connect with, or it may be. But as my friend Anthony Iannarino likes to say, you really want to connect with the CEO of the problem you're trying to reach. So all of that is just, when I say CEO, that's actually what I mean. It's just the right person you need to connect with. But that often these CEOs and chief executive officers have very busy, very active inboxes during the week, but that slows down over the weekend. And so some of the people I spoke to said that if you email someone very early Saturday morning or Sunday evening, you're very likely to get through to them, because that's when either they're checking their email before they start their weekends, but they're doing it early, so it doesn't overrun their weekend, or when they're preparing for the week ahead, so that's Sunday evening, they're back on the computer saying, okay, what do I have going on, and what do I need to do, and who do I need to send notes to, and so on. They're getting oriented for the week ahead, and those tend to be great times to reach out to people. Now, I've reached a few people that way. I reached Steve Forbes that way, and you know, others. I've heard some really interesting stories about that. So that's kind of interesting. It doesn't cost anything. You already have an email account, and if you can make that contact, that's great. If you do, and this is actually the chief executive officer, do them a favor, do yourself a favor, and show that you really respect their time. I think that always makes sense. And do this in whatever your message is. Make it, let's say, 12 words or less. And that partially that comes from a story that Aaron Ross, the author of Predictable Revenue, shared with me for the book. And he said, you know, I once reached out to Mark Benioff. Do you all know who Mark Benioff is? The founder of Salesforce. It's a hard guy to reach. And so he figured out that's another thing about email addresses, that it's usually pretty easy to figure out what anybody's email address is. And so he wrote one, and in 12 words or less, he said, Mark, we do this, I don't know what it was, but whatever it is, would that be of interest? And he got a response back 30 seconds later. So there was no screening whatsoever. It was just Mark looking at it, and because it was short enough, and I think certainly it said, at least between the lines, that he was respectful of Mark's time, but it was short enough to just say, oh, okay, I'll just answer this right now. And that seems to work. There's a really interesting, does any of that, I mean, do you use any techniques like that to reach people that you're not reaching otherwise? Any stories?
I've done it on the weekend and had success. And short emails had better success.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that works. I think that's a great thing. So, I want to share with you one quick. How are we doing for time, Tom?
What time is it?
3:45.
Pardon me?
3:45.
We can go another 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, and so we won't cover all of. That's too bad. Well, anyway, there's the book. But there's a story of Paul McCord, who was a sales trainer, but before that he was a mortgage broker, and before even that he was working in the home building business. So he put together a campaign to reach out to the 70 local builders that he knew of in the area. And what he wanted to do was foster a referral program, or just referral relationships with them, so that when they had buyers, they'd refer them to him for financing. But his financing product had something in there for builders, so it actually released some funds early for the builders, so it was helpful to the builders. So he put together a campaign, and he knew that builders were used to seeing things in the form of flow charts, and rolled up building plans and so on. So he mailed his mailing in a tube, so it looked like one of those things showing up in the mail, and expressed his value proposition in a flow chart. And he ended up, I think he spent $175 on this campaign, and he ended up generating $1.1 million in fees from it. So about half of the builders responded and said, "Sure, we'll join your program." And I think that's a terrific use of snail mail, still to a very small audience, but with a relevant, very targeted message. He's spending more than you would typically spend on a direct mail piece, but it made sense. So using those free or nearly free methods can make a lot of sense. You know, if we had more time, I'm sorry I didn't realize for me it went fast. I hope it did for you as well. But you know, there are other interesting uses of insight and media exposure. I think particularly information and insight, or intelligence. If you become a source of intelligence, and you continually provide that, or research, you continually provide that to the person you're trying to reach out, or the people you're trying to reach out to, I think that helps as well. Again, all of this, again, the same caveat, it has to be relevant to what it is they're doing and what they're facing in their companies and in market conditions and so on. What is it that you're bringing to the table that makes sense? But if it's within the context of those things, I think that makes sense. And then there are over-the-top methods. So if the gifts sounded over the top, there's two stories that are I think you'll really enjoy in the book. One of a sales rep who used a pigeon to get a hold of Steve Jobs. He sent the pigeon and had Steve write the name of his favorite restaurant, a date and a time, and a little slip of paper and a capsule on the pigeon's leg, and released the pigeon. And then so they met, and the rep got a $250,000 deal out of that. There are some really interesting things people are doing out there. You guys, Ken, you shared one with us today, your T-shirt, which I think is great. It's a great, inexpensive way to connect with and collect the names of and the contact information, really collect leads at the show. I think that's brilliant. If we only have 10 minutes left, what I'd like to ask is anyone willing to share some thoughts about, have we inspired you to, through this talk, to come up with a new campaign? I mean, we heard about the cement shoots, which is great, but anyone else have anything that has come to mind that you might now be considering using?
This is Sam. English is not my first language.
Okay.
I'm thinking of sending a very high-end pair of scissors. I happened to get one years ago. I have it on my desk. I absolutely love it. It's amazing how you enjoy having a really good pair of scissors. And I was thinking of sending it to my group of customers who think to be hands-on and would use it. And on there, engrave their name and say cut expenses or cut out the competition. Something like that. Again, I don't know if grammatically that works in English. It feels funny to me still, but if it does work, then I'll do something like that. Position ourselves as a long-term partner to differentiate yourself in that competitive field.
I like that. Does anyone have any reaction? Anything to share?
Okay. I just heard that cut out the competition is English and it works.
That's true.
It is.
It does work. I mean, so James, if you got that, what would you think? How would that?
Well, I was a director of purchasing for many years, so I'm probably much more cynical than anybody else about any attempted contact from that perspective. But my first reaction kind of is cut out the competition. Well, I mean, what you're trying to steal, it seems a little confusing to me whether you're trying to help me cut out the competition or whether you're trying to cut out all the other competition and get my business. Which makes me a little bit leery of you're just trying to muscle your way in here or something. I just found it a little confusing because I wasn't sure if you were going to help me do that or whether you were trying to do that yourself to me, so to speak.
Would it help if your name was engraved on there, James? Or we have the tools to
Cut out your competition.
cut out your competition.
Cut out your competition, yeah, or something. But I will say, I mean, there are some of those things. I mean, I'd probably really like to get a nice pair of scissors myself. I've been using the same ones for 35 years.
I agree.
So,
Sam
will take care of you.
Every Christmas when I'm cutting up the paper, I think I should probably get myself a
They're
decent
always
pair of
useful.
scissors. Yeah. So.
I really like that, particularly if they're really nice scissors.
Yeah.
And you know, you could write. I know I could sit down and write some really interesting stuff about scissors, so that things that you might not have even considered about scissors, but you know, when you get right down to it, they're meant to cut things. And what I'd love to talk to you about is cutting expenses.
Yeah, I write there, cut expenses and your competition.
What about sheer excellence?
Sheer excellence, yeah, sheer joy.
But you know, I want to caution you. You avoid being cute in the copy.
Cut your competition, and I don't want to position myself as being cheap or.
Well, you don't want to get cute because people don't want to be talked at. They want to be talked to, but not at. Ken, you're a fellow DMA guy.
He ran out real quick.
Andy walked out.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, that's all right.
So, so
market
I,
leader.
I have a general question.
But,
Jim
you know,
Abel is up. He's got something.
I've got a question.
Okay, yeah.
I understand a lot of the techniques we've talked about. I understand if it's a high value to the person who's there. Okay, so CEO misses an earnings projection, goes out to the street, big embarrassment, got to do something to correct it for the next quarter. Okay, so I get that. So if you have something to offer them that can help, and you can target and message to them, makes perfect sense. But if you're in the more commodity space, where you're pretty far down on somebody's radar screen, and it's something they have to do, but not something that's really top of mind, how do you get into those kind of things? And I'll think, I don't know if your components are top of mind or is this part of a project?
Well, ours are top of mind, but my family also has a plumbing company, and they do a lot of septic tank pumping.
Okay.
So it kind of goes
Septic
along
tank,
that. Right.
something septic tank pumping, and not something that's top of mind unless I guess I have a big problem. So in that case, they're probably going on the internet, they're probably searching for, I need somebody to come pump my septic tank. But if I'm gonna proactively market to them, you know, what are you gonna say about a septic tank to get it top of mind? Well, it's not relevant.
Yeah.
So janitorial service falls in the
It could be a
same
good
category.
cartoon. There's
Probably more of a non-contact marketing challenge. It really, I would imagine, actually, I would be, unless I knew that the people were likely to need a septic tank, so maybe there could have been a trigger event.
Trigger events I get.
Yeah,
But if there's no trigger
it makes
event.
sense. Otherwise, one of our clients is a roofing client. We do a drip campaign. We've been doing the same drip campaign for them for 8 years or so. Every month we do first it was a postcard, now they're emails, and there's a cartoon. I do a monthly cartoon about this about their clients. Actually, they're personalized, and we're there's always a message of, hey, if you call us for a free inspection. But otherwise, the strategy behind this is we just want to foster a relationship over time, because people don't need roofing services, and they don't need a new roof very often. And so you just want to generate top of mind. And I hate to keep bringing things back to cartoons, but I know that when we send someone a cartoon, let's say it's so now it's not business to business, but it's business to consumer, because we're talking about septic tanks. But if I send them a cartoon on a postcard, but the postcard also has a coupon, they'll end up saving that on the refrigerator. They'll keep those things on refrigerator doors for years. So that might help too, but neither of these are contact marketing sorts of challenges. Contact marketing is really just about reaching out to the handful of people who can make the biggest difference to your either your career or your business.
Understood.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, perfectly.
And I don't know if I've actually answered your question fully.
No, you did.
Oh, okay.
Wrong tool.
Okay, good.
Wrong tool for the target market that we're talking about. At least for a couple of us.
I agree with.
But I agree with drip marketing, and a cartoon could be very
Yeah,
fun.
I mean, you can use a cartoon for almost anything.
Yeah.
Well, it may depend, Jeff. I mean, if you're going for, one of these high-rise buildings or something, right? You still need to find the person that's really in charge of that.
But they're not. It's not their primary job.
No, but.
And it's only an issue if it's an issue.
Right.
If it's not an issue, they don't care.
So Jeff, you're one of the few, a couple of CEOs seated at the table, but you were pretty clear about it. You don't like a lot of the approaches that are made to you. I don't blame you actually, but you're not liking that. But are you liking? Is any of this helping you change your thinking at all?
Well, I think I was, as Tom said, and I was thinking the same thing. Creating some awareness, using some humor, and I think you could create some really clever cartoons around the dirty office and janitorial and stuff like that, for example. That when the time came that they were frustrated with their current company, here's a company who is completely different because nobody's doing anything like that in our industry. And I think there's also ways we are differentiated a little bit that we're much easier to do business with than a lot of the other firms. We don't use contracts and all kinds of things to keep people locked in. So I think once we get in front of somebody, we have a pretty good success rate. So for us, it's all about lead generation. We do a pretty good job once we get a qualified lead. So that's the name of the game. So creating awareness for me is really the issue. And I think that's an interesting angle. Now, my cartooning skills are about -100 on a 100 scale.
Yeah, but cartooning is it's many things, but one of the things it is very, very challenging.
Yeah.
That's well. Great.
So other than you, are there generally sources that you can get? I don't know if you do something that small, because that'd be a relatively small program, but are there sources for things like clever, marketing smart cartoons that are not necessarily targeted to an individual, but targeted to an issue?
You could Google dirty cartoons and see what comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things you can suggest.
Yeah, that's probably more.
That probably
But I'm
will.
also going to make a caveat with that, which is that cartoons and humor is really difficult to aim properly.
Yeah.
But having said that, there's the Cartoon Bank, the New Yorker Cartoon Bank, and that's a repository of I think 90,000 cartoons. So half of them have been in the magazine, the other have never been in the magazine.
It's a good sign.
I'm trying to think. Well, that's a good place to look for cartoons. The thing is, here's the thing. When I have new clients, and I guess I should say also that I mean that's what I do. But I don't want to. I'm not here to pitch you at all.
You mean?
So if you want to talk about it afterward, I'm happy to do that. You can either I can give you all my contact information, or you can contact me through Tom. But the thing that you want the cartoon to do is remember I told you that cartoons and humor is about truth revealed in a twist. And so that truth is that point of agreement that you want to plant subliminally with the cartoon. And there are some strategies involved in doing that. But ultimately what you want people to do is encounter it and go, oh, that's cool. But in that split second, they've said, I agree with the central point. And then they turn, what's this about? And not only that, but, oh, that's cool. I want to show it around, or I want to keep it in my office forever. I want to get trained, something like that. So threading that needle is actually it's a very precise thing to do. And anyway, I'm happy to help you, let's say offline, to come to a further resolution of that, if that's what you want to do.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you saying that one of the things you do is someone gives you an idea of a specific type of joke, or they give you some detail or something and they hand it off to you, some idea about I'd like to do a funny cartoon about a dirty office, and then you create a cartoon for it?
First, it's just that I just need to know what you're doing, I mean, I've learned a lot about that, and just as we've gone around the room. But what is it that the people you're reaching out to need? Why do they need to be in touch with you? What is it? What's the unique thing about you and what you're bringing to the table? And then it doesn't all get expressed in the cartoon. The cartoon is just a device to get them involved in the message. So it might be that, actually I will just tell you that a lot of times we're using cartoons. We've got about 1,500 cartoons in our image bank at this point. So a lot of times I'm using cartoons from our image bank. But there's a strategy behind which ones we use or which ones we create.
Okay.
And so I wouldn't expect you to come and have that strategy worked out or even be aware of it. It's just a conversation, and it's just as though you were talking to somebody who's going to write copy for you.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can. Ken, does that make sense?
It's Ron.
Oh, Ron.
Ron.
Sorry. Oh, I'm going to have to put my glasses on. But Ron, does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
it does.
Are there any other questions because I don't want to hold you over time either.
Well, just one quick question. I mean, how do you feel sort of about the saturation rate at this point, or is there a list or something? In other words, I don't want to say that's a good idea. Let me, run a, contact marketing campaign and contact, the CEO of Pepsi, and then I find out you've already done that. So now I become just a mimic, and they go, well, we've seen all that stuff before.
Yeah. You want to be and I imagine you're talking about the cartoon in particular.
Yeah. Well, in particular, yeah, but it would be a worry for any of those types of things.
Yeah, and there's a of any idea for life cycle. There are two life cycles involved with any idea. One is just the utility life cycle, and the other is the novelty life cycle. So with cartoons, once they've seen a cartoon, and then the next time they see a cartoon, well, they've already seen a cartoon. But if you, do any of you read The New Yorker? For
Yes.
example, do you read The New Yorker?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I know you know that when you read The New Yorker, well, actually, a lot of people read The New Yorker just for the cartoons. And so if cartoons were the sort of thing that would die off because someone's already seen them before, then there wouldn't be a reason to have the cartoons in the New Yorker or in the Wall Street Journal or any other place. And the fact is that they're expressing something, almost like it's a very distinctive way to express something, but it's a lot like writing. Just, I've already seen something in writing. It's not something anyone would say. They'd read it. Hopefully, they'd read it if you made it interesting enough. But the other thing is, look, there is this ongoing process that will always, it's like the moving of tectonic plates, it's always going to be happening. People need to get in touch with people, and people need to get in touch with the CEO of Pepsi and of Enron and so on, or owners of SMB businesses, you name it. People are always needing to get in touch with each other. And so there are a lot of, cartoons are not the only way to do it. I surely don't want to leave you with that message that cartoons are the way to do it and that's it. There are lots and lots and lots of ways to do it. And so I can't remember if you read the book
I did,
all the way or not, but I would encourage you to read the book, and I think you'll see a lot of things that you can just take away. I think this sort of the book is full of takeaways and ways to, I don't mean to have you just read the book and say, okay, great, it's like a catalog, I'm going to take this one and I'm going to use that, but have it inspire some thoughts of your own, and you will end up with something quite original. Again, we lost the cement guy, the concrete guy, but the shoes.
Oh, there
he is. The cement shoes, I love that. It's like, on that one, that's the pair that you wouldn't want to complete. It's like either we meet or bring the other one back.
So I want to figure this out. All I have to do is get a mold, and then we can make them in our own plant, and I'll give them as Christmas presents.
That's right.
Use that. I would love to hear more about it, because I think that would make a great story. All kinds of really interesting messaging that you could put together.
Don't make me send the other one.
Yeah.
So Sam, whose first language is not English, is asking, what's the big deal about concrete shoes?
Well, Sam, there are some movies on the mafia that you should see, and the mafia likes to outfit people with cement shoes and drop them in the bottom of the East River in New York. It's their way of disposing of people.
Yeah, okay. Disposing of problems in your face. We dispose of your problems.
That's a great slogan on there.
Yeah. The cement shoes, I hope you'll do that. I love the cement shoes.
That's great.
Do you have any Italian last?
No, your shipping costs are going to be huge.
Yeah, that's the problem.
It'll be worth it.
Stu.
God, I think
A
that's
guy
just
named
amazing.
Vito delivers them personally.
Stu, let me ask
I don't know, how are we doing for time? Should we wrap up?
Yeah, let's wrap up, and I'm going to ask the last question, and that question is, what are the different ways you engage with your clients? And A, and B, do you do just consulting also?
Well, and C, what size clients do you work with?
Yeah.
So we
Well,
can-
so when people ask that question, the ones I'm going after, that I'm reaching out to are Fortune 1000 clients. But I actually end up, I get approached by a lot of people who also like to do it. We work with my smaller clients as well. Our services, typically we're running campaigns that are based on either the big board, or I'll show you this. This is a new format. It's called, I call it a box card, and it's this cardboard piece that has a greeting card inside, but all you're seeing is a crop of the cartoon. And I think that's kind of like dragging a string around the corner from a cat. I don't think you can resist opening it. And we're using, we're about to use robots to write the message in handwriting, but we can digitize your signature, and those are pretty cool things too. And that's what we're using typically for our clients, and they're seeing great success with it. It's pretty cool. You also asked about consulting, and I'm happy to do that. So to just work with you to work out the details, or let's say a strategy for running your own contact marketing campaigns. At some point, we're going to start running mastermind groups. I haven't decided yet whether it's going to revolve around contact marketing, or I have a new book I'm working on called the Weed Strategies, and we're going to be studying business strategy as inspired by weeds, and it's actually an amazing framework for business strategy. So it's either going to be it's going to be one of those two, or maybe both of them combined. So just overall strategy for growing like a weed. So does that, hopefully that answers your question. Tom, would you like me to give my contact information, or do you want to?
Sure.
Okay. So if you have a pen and you want to write this down, my email address is Stu Heinecke @gmail.com. So StuHeinecke @gmail.com. My phone is 206-286-8668. And certainly, if you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, and particularly if you mentioned that we were on this session together, I'm happy to connect there. And otherwise, you can also find me on Twitter. That's @by Stu Heinecke. Good.
Very
Well,
good.
thank you all. What a great honor to get to spend the afternoon with you.
Thank you, Stu.
Thank
We
you,
appreciate
Stu.
it very much. Good job.